Welcome back. We are going to start glucocorticoids. As you are aware, the adrenal gland has two regions physiologically separated for the production of different types of hormones, and the glucocorticoids are produced from the adrenal cortex. We have seen earlier that catecholamines are produced from adrenal medulla, and of the different types of glucocorticoids which we are going to see later, majority of the effects of the hormone are due to cortisol. You see here, these are the different effects of cortisol in different parts of the body, and we are going to see them in detail. Actually, there are three different types of steroid hormones produced from the adrenal cortex: mineralocorticoids, which we are not going to study, glucocorticoids, and also androgens. We are going to study only the glucocorticoids. And as the name indicates, they have effects on the blood glucose concentration and also on the metabolism of proteins and fat. Cortisol is the major glucocorticoid. As I told you earlier, this is actually an adrenal gland, and these are the different parts of that gland. This is the adrenal medulla producing catecholamines. For the time being, we may just forget it. Otherwise, the remaining regions are categorized for our convenience into zona glomerulosa, which is producing aldosterone, and zona fasciculata, which is producing cortisol and androgens, and along with the zona reticularis. So we are going to study about cortisol, and the cortisol is produced by these regions of the adrenal gland. As I told you just now, it has three regions. And these adrenocortical hormones are steroid hormones, and these steroids are derived from cholesterol. We know that cholesterol is actually made in our body in the liver, and our diet sometimes also contains cholesterol. Which are the different glucocorticoids? Cortisol is the most potent one, and actually that constitutes about 95% of all that activity concerned. While these corticosteroids and the cortisones etc. are also there, some of them are natural while some others are synthetic. For example, cortisone is synthetic in nature, and prednisone is synthetic in nature. Prednisone is synthetic in nature. Why there are synthetic hormones as well? Because they have important therapeutic applications. As we found just now, 95% of the glucocorticoid activity is because of cortisol. This cortisol is also called hydrocortisone. And of course, there is the corticosterone as well. And how is this hormone moving in the blood? Actually, the hormone is remaining bound to proteins. Which protein? Cortisol binding globulin, also called transcortin. Majority of the cortisol is remaining bound to this protein, while a small amount of the hormone is also remaining bound with albumin. And what are the functions of glucocorticoids? You see, this is a diagrammatic representation. This is actually fat tissue. How is it affecting the fat tissue? What about bone? Produces bone formation. What about liver? Glucose generation. You might have heard of gluconeogenesis. What about muscle? Decreasing amino acid uptake by the muscles. Pancreas counteracts insulin. That means the effect of cortisol is just opposite to that of insulin. What's the role of insulin? Removal of glucose from the blood. And this cortisol is trying to increase the concentration of glucose in the blood. And in adipose tissue, this cortisol is promoting breakdown of fat. Effect of cortisol on carbohydrate metabolism. What is gluconeogenesis? Gluconeogenesis, as you are aware, is the synthesis of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. And what are these non-carbohydrate sources? You know that they are amino acids and proteins. That means cortisol promotes synthesis of carbohydrates from amino acids and proteins, mainly from two effects. Point 1. Cortisol increases the enzymes required to convert amino acids into glucose. That means gluconeogenetic enzymes. You know that for the production of enzymes, first of all, messenger RNA should be formed for the translation, and for the formation of messenger RNA, transcription should be there from DNA. That means cortisol promotes transcription of DNA and translation of mRNA and ultimately leading to the synthesis of enzymes. Point 2. Cortisol causes mobilization of amino acids from the extrahepatic tissues other than the liver. And what are these extrahepatic tissues? Mainly the muscles. So, if cortisol is there in excess quantity, amino acids will be mobilized from the muscles, as we are going to see later. And as a result of all those things, you know what's going to happen? The gluconeogenesis is increased, which means glucose concentration increases, and which in turn will lead to increased glycogen storage in the liver. And the effect of cortisol allows other glycolytic hormones such as epinephrine and glucagon to mobilize glucose in times of need. For example, in between meals. Decreased glucose utilization by cells. While cortisol is increasing a synthesis of glucose, at the same time it is actually motivating a decreased glucose utilization. And this is probably by depressing the oxidation of NADH plus H plus. Elevated blood glucose concentration and adrenal diabetes. Both the increased gluconeogenesis and the reduction in the rate of glucose utilization will ultimately cause the blood glucose concentration to increase. And once the blood glucose concentration increases, you know that insulin is going to be secreted. And high levels of glucocorticoid reduces the sensitivity of many tissues to insulin. Which tissues? Skeletal muscle, adipose tissue, etc. That means when glucose concentration increases in the blood under the influence of cortisol, even though more insulin is produced, it is not going to be of much effect because these tissues would not respond to insulin. And one possible explanation is that the high level of fatty acid caused by the effect of glucocorticoids to mobilize lipids from the fat depots may impair insulin's actions on the tissues. We are going to see later that this cortisol and other glucocorticoids promote hydrolysis of fat and releasing of fatty acids into the circulation. And the increased blood glucose concentration is great enough that the condition is called adrenal diabetes. And what about administration of insulin? We found earlier that even though insulin production increases, it will not have much effect. Therefore, even if we are injecting insulin into the body, it will have only a small effect or a negligible effect upon the concentration of glucose in circulation. Okay, then what's the role on protein metabolism? You know that reduction of the protein stored in the body, especially in the cells except those of the liver, is taking place. Why? Point 1, the proteins which are already there in these tissues are broken down, and point 2, these hormones reduce the synthesis of new proteins. So, reduction in cellular protein is by means of two processes. Point 1, this cortisol mobilizes the proteins already present in the cells and tissues, and point 2, it inhibits the synthesis of new proteins for the purpose of storage, etc. And it also depresses the formation of RNA and protein synthesis in the extrahepatic tissues. And that's why when the cortisol is in excess quantity concentration, the muscles may become too weak. Why? Because of the removal of proteins. Sometimes it will make him very, very weak so that he will not be able to stand up from a squatting position. Also, the immunity functions of the lymphoid tissue can be decreased to a small fraction of the initial normal values. And cortisol increases the proteins of the liver and plasma. Liver and plasma. You know that they are not actually storage proteins. And this is actually, they are exceptions, because these are due to a possible effect of cortisol to enhance the amino acid transport into the liver cells, but not to the other cells. You know that amino acid transport is required for gluconeogenesis in the liver. For that purpose, transporter proteins, etc. are required, and their synthesis is promoted. And extrahepatic cells and enhance the transport into hepatic cells. Cortisol depresses amino acid transport into muscle cells and other extrahepatic cells. This naturally decreases their amino acid concentration and decreases the synthesis of new proteins. Yet, catabolism of proteins which are already present there may continue, so that amino acids are released and they diffuse out of the cells to increase the plasma amino acid concentration. That's why cortisol can mobilize amino acids from the non-hepatic tissues and thereby decreasing the tissue stores of protein. The increased plasma concentration of amino acids and enhance the transport of amino acids in the hepatic cells, they account for the increased utilization of amino acid by the liver. For what purpose? Point 1, deamination. That means amino acid catabolism. Point 2, increased protein synthesis. Point 3, formation of plasma proteins. And point 4, increase the rate of gluconeogenesis. And what about the mobilization of fatty acid? Cortisol promotes mobilization of fatty acid from the adipose tissues. That means it will increase the circulating fatty acids in the plasma. You know that these fatty acids also are utilized for energy. That way, glucose is spared as far as possible. And increased mobilization of fat by cortisol combined with increased oxidation of fatty acids help to shift the metabolic system from glucose based to fatty acid based, especially when starvation is there or food is not available for some period of time, or when the person is under stress to a certain extent. But remember, this cortisol mechanism is very good, but it will take a few hours, actually several hours, to become fully developed. And the increased use of fatty acids for metabolic energy is an important factor for long-term conservation of body glucose and glycogen. Why? Many of the tissues of the body, especially brain, can utilize only glucose as the metabolic energy source. And obesity caused by excess cortisol. Despite the fact that cortisol can cause a moderate degree in the case of mobilization, moderate degree of mobilization of fatty acids from the adipose tissue, still people with excess cortisol secretion may develop a peculiar type of obesity. Peculiar type means the fat is being deposited in certain areas of the body, with excess deposit in the chest region and in the head of the body, and actually we call it moon face. And obesity results from excess stimulation of the food intake, with the fat being generated in some tissues and not in the other tissues. What is the role of cortisol in resisting stress and inflammation? In any type of stress, whether it is physical or mental or neurogenic, whatever type it will increase the production of ACTH, and in turn it will increase the production of cortisol. And what are the types of stresses? Maybe trauma, infection, intense heat or cold, injection of some drugs such as norepinephrine, etc., surgery, or any other factor that may affect the body, including diseases. All these act as stress, ultimately inducing the production of cortisol. What are the anti-inflammatory effects of cortisol level? When tissues are damaged by trauma, by infection with the microbes, etc., there will be inflammation. And in some conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, the inflammation will be more damaging. And the administration of large amounts of cortisol can usually block this inflammation or even reverse many of its effects once it has begun. When large amounts of cortisol are secreted or injected, it has two basic anti-inflammatory effects. Point 1. It can block the early stages of the inflammation process before inflammation even begins. And point 2. If inflammation has already begun, it causes rapid resolution of the inflammation and increase the rapidity of healing. These effects are explained. See, these are the 5 stages of inflammation for your knowledge. Release from damaged tissue cells of the chemical substance, and they activate the inflammation process. Which are the chemical substances? Histamine, bradykinin, proteolytic enzymes, prostaglandins, and leukotrienes. From the damaged tissues or cells, these chemical substances are released. And point 2, this will result in an increased blood flow in the inflamed area. How is there an increased blood flow? This is caused by some of the chemical substances we mentioned earlier. And point 3, leakage of large quantity of pure plasma out of the capillaries into the damaged area because of increased capillary permeability. And this is followed by clotting of the tissue fluids. And point 4, infiltration of leukocytes into that area. And point 5, after a few days or weeks, the ingrowth of fibrous tissue is often leading to the healing process. So these are the stages of inflammation, and our cortisol will interfere with the development of these stages. How? Cortisol prevents development of inflammation by stabilizing lysosomes. You see, cortisol stabilizes lysosomal membranes, which means lysosomes are not broken down, and the releasing of the digestive enzymes, which we call lysozymes, is prevented. Cortisol decreases permeability of the capillaries. That means leakage of the substances across the capillaries from the blood is prevented. Cortisol decreases both migration of WBCs into the inflamed area and phagocytosis of the damaged cells. That means it is interfering with the immune action also. Cortisol suppresses the immune system, causing lymphocyte reproduction to decrease. Another way, and cortisol attenuates, weakens fever, mainly because it reduces the release of interleukin 1, from the WBCs. Okay, and actually cortisol has a global effect in reducing all aspects of the inflammatory process. And by now you might understood that cortisol causes resolution of inflammation. So even after inflammation is developing or established, if we administer cortisol, it can reduce inflammation. The immediate effect is that the factors that are promoting inflammation are blocked, and the rate of healing also is actually increased. Also, in some diseases, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatic fever, acute glomerulonephritis, etc., cortisol plays a major role. And there's a problem. Actually, these diseases are causing severe inflammation, and the harmful effects of the diseases on the body are caused mainly by the inflammation itself and not by the other aspects of the disease. When cortisol or other glucocorticoids are administered, the inflammation begins to subside within 24 hours. And even though the cortisol does not correct the basic disease condition, merely preventing the damaging effects of the inflammatory response can be a life-saving measure. Remember, the cortisol may not destroy the pathogen that entered your body, but its harmful effects are being solved by cortisol, and that way this becomes a life-saving measure. And other effects of cortisol, this cortisol also blocks the inflammatory response to allergic reactions. You know that an allergic reaction is actually an untimely and unwanted excess response of the body to some chemicals or some organisms that enter the body. So cortisol is actually important in allergic responses also. Example, it prevents the shock or death in anaphylaxis, which otherwise may kill many people. And effect on the blood cells. Cortisol decreases the number of eosinophils and lymphocytes. And administration of cortisol causes significant atrophy, destruction of the lymphoid tissue throughout the body. Therefore, the level of immunity is decreased. And cortisol increases the production of RBC. And this may even lead to polycythemia, increased number of these cells. And what's the mechanism of action of cortisol? Cortisol is lipid soluble, so it easily passes through the plasma membrane, and it binds with a receptor in the cytoplasm, and this hormone receptor complex then interacts with the specific sequences on the DNA. We call them glucocorticoid response elements. That way, inducing transcription, translation, protein synthesis, etc. wherever required. And you see typical pattern of cortisol secretion during the daytime. You see at what time is the cortisol secretion increasing? By 8 o'clock. Why is it increasing from 12 o'clock midnight? Because the food you already consumed is decreasing and the glucose concentration is slowly decreasing in the circulation. That's why cortisol is increasing. By 8 o'clock, just imagine you are having your food, breakfast, then more glucose is released into circulation, then the level of cortisol actually decreases. Thereafter, there is the lunch time, and again, while you are going to the night after dinner, the cortisol level will be initially lower because of the digestion products, but thereafter it is going to increase because the digested products are being such as glucose, etc., are being removed from circulation by means of the cells which are carrying out metabolism. This much about cortisol and glucocorticoids.